What's up, everybody? Welcome to Heresy Financial. My name is Joe Brown. Just a few days ago, the president of the Shanghai Gold Exchange called for a new currency to replace the dollar as the reserve currency of the world. Now, not in retaliation to that specifically, but in retaliation to the whole coronavirus situation in general, there are rumors that President Trump and his administration is looking at ways to potentially try and default on the treasury debt that China specifically holds. Pairing these two facts together looks like we are entering into further stages of the currency war, which trade wars usually lead to currency wars. So in light of everything that is happening right now for the past couple of years, with China's growth threatening the global dominance of the United States of America, it is no surprise that we are entering into this stage of the fight. What are the implications of China pushing for a new global reserve currency? And what would the implications be of the United States actually defaulting on the over $1 trillion of treasury debt that China holds? Let's dive in. So Reuters recently reported that the president of the Shanghai Gold Exchange, that's the biggest gold exchange in the world, located in Shanghai, China, he spoke about how it is very disadvantageous to everyone in the world except for the United States of America for the dollar to hold such a preeminent spot as the global reserve currency. The fact is that the United States can and has for decades used the dollar global reserve currency status as a weapon to force countries to play by its rules. It can do this because the United States dollar is what futures contracts for commodities are denominated in. So dollars make up the other side of pretty much every global transaction. And all payments are routed through the SWIFT system, which the United States controls. And so when you hear the word sanctions, like Iran or Venezuela or any countries that the United States looks at and says, hey, you're not playing by our rules, you're doing something we don't want you to do, they can impose sanctions on that country. And all that means is that we're going to lock you out from being able to use the dollar. You're not going to be able to use the SWIFT system to be able to transact. And it essentially locks a country out from being able to do any business with any other countries. So it puts a huge, heavy toll on that country because they can't buy or sell things from other countries that are also playing by America's rules. Now, the United States has used this and abused this power for so long that many countries have been looking for ways to get around this for a long time. Over the past year, there have been new infrastructure set in place that at the right time could be used to displace SWIFT as the global payment routing system. Countries throughout Europe, Russia, China, and the Middle East have coordinated to make a new system called Instex. Now, it's not currently in use or in play right now to get around sanctions by the US. Trump has been very outspoken about the fact that there will be heavy consequences laid on any country that uses it to get around US sanctions. But the infrastructure is there and waiting to be put into place as soon as the right moment comes. It's no coincidence, at least to me, that it's the president of the Shanghai Gold Exchange in China that is proposing this. China has been loading up on their gold reserves and stockpiling gold. Russia as well. There are many countries, many central banks all over the world that have been dumping treasuries over the last couple of years and buying gold instead. And this is simply because nobody can outright manipulate or fraudulently control the supply of gold. Yes, you can mine new gold, but the mining of new gold is directly tied to the cost of labor associated with extracting it from the earth. It's not something like the dollar that you can just print larger and larger denominated bills or digitally assign new dollars to primary dealer and bank accounts. And the president of the Shanghai Gold Exchange directly commented on the fact that the Federal Reserve, in conjunction with the federal government, have embarked on a path of extreme fiscal and monetary irresponsibility in order to deal with the coronavirus crisis. He basically acknowledged that everything they're doing will have a long-term effect on the dollar to severely impact its purchasing power and its value over time. And so he said, look, it's not in anybody's best interest except for the USA to continue to use the dollar as the global reserve currency because it hurts everybody else. Now, his proposed solution was to have a currency that is not controlled by any single country, so that cannot be manipulated to the advantage of any single country. And he mentioned, yes, gold for thousands of years has performed this role. And the Reuters article that is talking about this makes a comment and says, hey, look, gold has its limitations. It's not conducive to international trade. That's not true. It's the false gold exchange standards that were set in place in Bretton Woods that were not conducive to global trade and global exchange. Those were still set to the advantage of the United States of America. But for thousands of years, when money was actually gold, and the word dollar and the word pound and the word franc were actually just defined as weights of gold, certain ounces or grains of gold, that meant there was one global currency that nobody controlled. Those were just different words that meant different weights of gold. So you could take any gold minted by anyone in the world, and that was good payment. There were no currency exchanges anywhere in the world. And it was extremely difficult for any one country to gain advantage over another country in terms of currency manipulation, because quite frankly, the only way you could do that was to debase the amount of gold or silver in your coin. Now, if you haven't followed the rise of China over the last couple of decades, I would highly recommend a book. It's called Destined for War: Can America and China Escape Thucydides' Trap? Thucydides was a historian, an Athenian historian, who documented the Peloponnesian War between the Spartans and the Athenians. And in one of the most famous and often quoted quotes throughout all of history, he wrote, "It was the rise of Athens and the fear that that instilled in Sparta that made war inevitable." Ray Dalio also talks about this dynamic a lot, that the reigning power of the USA and the rising power of China puts great tension on the world because of the changing dynamics in global power. And this same thing has happened dozens of times throughout history, and even in the last 500 years, it's happened about 16 times. With the rise of China's influence all over, especially the Eastern Hemisphere, especially in Asia, it's no surprise that them saying things like this and performing certain actions are, at the slightest, getting on the nerves of American politicians. In response to potentially a lot more than even what we're discussing here in the video, the Trump administration, there are rumors that they're talking about basically placing reparations on China for the coronavirus. And they would do so by potentially defaulting on some or all of the treasuries that China currently owns, which is over $1 trillion worth. Now, even them just talking about this could spark a sell-off in treasuries, and treasuries have been getting sold off ever since the crisis really started to hit the markets back in February. That is why the Federal Reserve so quickly opened up so many facilities and programs in order to accept treasuries for dollars, because everybody was selling treasuries so fast that it was making yields spike, and they cannot allow yields on treasuries to spike, or else the government just defaults because they can't afford the interest on their current debt load, because so much of their debt is short-term dated, and so they're continually having to roll it over. So as they have to roll it over, they'd have to get new debt with a higher interest rate. And so the Federal Reserve is putting a floor underneath all the selling by all the central banks all around the world by buying it with printed dollars. And so talking about the fact that you might default on $1 trillion worth of your debt on purpose as an act of retribution against a country who is more and more becoming a global rival to your own supreme dominance, that doesn't speak confidence in your currency and in your global leadership. And so it's very possible that even the rumors that they might do this might spark even more of a sell-off in treasuries. And especially if they actually do it. Nobody would want to get caught in the crosshairs of holding treasuries that might be worth absolutely nothing instead of just worth a lot less from all the inflation. And so this could cause a tsunami of the rest of the treasuries that the world is holding being sold off in exchange for dollars. And in case you're wondering, why does that matter? If a country, a central bank in Europe or in Asia, dumps their treasuries, they get dollars instead. Well, it's highly inflationary, because if you don't want treasuries that are basically dollars that pay you interest, you're not going to want dollars that don't pay you interest. You're going to get rid of those. But if everybody's getting rid of treasuries and then everybody's getting rid of dollars, the only place that those dollars can go is back to the United States of America, where people and businesses are required to accept them by law. And the way that the dollars come back home is by purchasing U.S. assets and products and goods that are located in the United States of America. And this is the exact same dynamic that you see that has happened in many countries all over the world, all throughout history. Whenever there is a crisis in the confidence of a currency, because of monetary expansion, there's a crack up boom where everything gets more expensive because all of the dollars or all of the units of currency flood back in from foreigners in order to dump it and get products, at least something that will retain some of its value instead of being wiped out. And so the United States is currently in this pattern where they're trying to stop basically the implosion of their currency, but everything that they're doing to try and stop that is only accelerating it. So judging by what's happened in the past decades, the past few years, and then what's going on right now, it looks like these kind of things will continue. It looks like these kind of things will escalate. The trade war, currency war between us and China, and then the rest of the world as they try and position themselves so that the rest of the world, so that they're not at the mercy of the United States and the dollar. Those kind of things are only going to continue. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. That subscribe button really helps out the channel. You guys are the best. Have a great day.